Welcome, my dear ones. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we'll be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Sally and Graeme resist the advice to have an induction based only on the identification of her baby's size. Her caregivers were concerned about the risk of the baby's shoulders getting stuck. Her labour starts spontaneously at 41 plus 2 weeks, and whilst it was a long labour, she manages with the incredible support of Graeme. He helps her to find comfort and coaches her along the way. We discuss how important it is for women to be free to move during labour because they look for comfort, which supports the descent of the baby and can reduce risks of getting stuck. Graeme shares how his preparation and doing the practices really helped him to know what to do on the day and stay really present to Sally's needs. Their son arrived at 4.44 kilos. An inspiring story for anyone who is worried about having a big baby. Hello, everyone. Another week with the Transform Your Birth podcast. And with me today is the lovely Jennifer, and she's going to be sharing with us her story of 2 births. And when I was talking to Jen before we have gone on record here, she shared an interesting insight and reflection she's been having about her early life as a child and what happened, and she can actually draw a line between those experiences to her birth experiences. So I'm going to welcome Jen. Hello, darling.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us what happened when you were 11 years old, and then help us to understand how you think that might have influenced your birth.
So I've been reflecting lately. My births were over a year ago and then 2.5 years before that. But recently I've been reflecting how much my experience of childhood cancer when I was 11 really carried through to how I behaved in the hospital and how I think my births unfolded in the hospital setting, because I feel like I had quite a positive experience. But I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 11,
Wow.
which was quite a treatable cancer even then in 1996, kind of the second most curable after leukemia. But my treatment was really, really intense and I got extremely sick. And the longest I spent in hospital was 2 months straight. And yeah, I couldn't eat and I couldn't talk and I couldn't walk and I was very, very ill. But I was fully cured and really as becoming a 12-year-old, wanted to just get on with, there was heaps going on. I was finishing primary school. I was moving into high school. I wanted to get back to my dancing and I didn't, I think, reflect on it too much. I was just glad to be done. But yeah, I've been noticing really how comfortable I was in hospital compared to a lot of people, because I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and people saying, being in hospital itself can affect your birth.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's a foreign environment for a lot of women, and it does disturb birth. People don't realize that just even going to hospital is going to influence the way your labour unfolds. And of course, then we bring to the hospital whatever baggage we have around the medical system. My family are chronic for having white coat syndrome. That's what we call it, is every time you go to see the doctor, your blood pressure goes up. So different women have different responses to it. So what you're saying there sounds like as a child, you learnt to be comfortable in that environment. You were well cared for and it felt familiar to you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it does bring me some comfort to know that I'm around professionals, but I think it did make me a bit more passive. And certainly throughout my pregnancy, the chemo affected my fertility. So I was always told I would need to have kids kind of late 20s rather than late 30s. And I ended up having them essentially mid 30s.
Yeah.
And I had, since I was a teenager, seen a post-oncology fertility specialist,
Right.
frozen eggs, and I had expected to have a long and brutal journey to get pregnant, and I didn't.
Wow.
And yeah, the
Interesting.
doctors said, when you're ready to use your eggs, try for 1 or 2 months and then come and see me.
Mm-hmm.
So they were just, in my mind, token attempts
Yeah.
before I had an appointment already booked. And the day before the appointment, my period didn't come as it normally would. Like it, I had some bleeding, but it wasn't my normal routine, which was very regular.
Mm.
And I took a test and it was positive.
Oh, well done.
Yeah. And I couldn't believe it. And it actually
Wow.
made me really, really anxious throughout my entire pregnancy, which
Ah,
I didn't properly understand until afterwards.
yeah. Now that's interesting. So you were pregnant with your first baby. You surprised yourself by not needing fertility treatment after
Mm.
your childhood cancer. So how were you feeling then when you came into the idea of, okay, I've got to prepare to give birth? What am I going to do? How am I going to do this?
Um, well, I was, yeah, kind of passive in the process, like because I had expected to have trouble conceiving or not be able to conceive at all. I'd
Yeah.
been really hesitant to learn anything about pregnancy or birth. So for a person who is very keen to have kids, I knew nothing, kind of deliberately to, I guess, protect myself.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and
A nice, decent dose of denial, darling.
yeah, yeah.
So what I don't
Then,
know won't hurt me.
yeah, then when I was pregnant,
Yeah.
I had an app that told me, like, each day it gave me some tidbit of information about the kind of stage that I'm at of the
Yeah.
pregnancy, and I would read that thing 5 times a day because I was desperate for information. But I didn't know about this whole world of information that's out there, like podcasts and other people's birth stories, and like there is so much you could
Mm.
read and learn and listen to. But I didn't know that I was out there, and I didn't really feel like in amongst work and doctor's appointments and things that I had the time to really dive into it.
Okay.
Um, and so yeah,
But you
I
did end
thought,
up doing some preparation, didn't you?
yeah, I did.
So how
When
did
I
that
saw the
compare?
fertility doctor that
Mm.
day after the test, she ran a test to confirm that I was pregnant, the blood test. And she recommended an obstetrician in Canberra. So I went off to that obstetrician without really considering what model of care that I wanted. I
Mm.
didn't think about whether I wanted to go through the public hospital or try to have continuity of care through a birth center. I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
Um, I really just, she gave me a recommendation. I got the referral. I went. And then that obstetrician was attached to a private hospital. So that was my hospital. And I did the tour there and met the midwives and did some like preparatory classes at the hospital that were more focused on breastfeeding and kind of the medical options that you have during birth, about um, what happens if you are induced, and what happens if you want an epidural, and
Mm.
kind of explaining those, which is really important. But there was nothing really about preparing your mind for birth.
Yeah, no, that is the missing link a lot of the time. And I think what you're describing there is quite common is we tend to be led in those early days when we're pregnant for the first time because we don't know the system. We don't
Mm.
tend to, and people don't tend to talk about options of care and what that then actually results in, what you're actually signing up for when you go
Mm.
through that process. And different models suit different people, but ultimately it's where women feel safe. That's the most important thing. But it's also where women can communicate their needs, feel heard, feel respected in their care. These are all very important things to look for. And then when it comes to doing the hospital classes, it's very common feedback that I get that they focus on what they need you to know to use their service. So if they offer you an epidural, you've been informed and things like that, but they don't help women to understand the how to go about dealing with whatever unfolds on the day. So they're not giving you many tools or skills other than medical options. And the biggest missing link in the whole process is the mind. Exactly what you've described is that we just don't realise that birth, more than anything, is a mental and an emotional journey as much as it is a physiological journey, because you can't separate the physiology from the emotions. It's all interconnected, and how we think will influence how our body responds to birth. So when you did those classes, you got a sense of, hang on, there's something missing here.
Yeah, and my friend who had her babies a little before me had done calm birth in Sydney or in Bowral, and she recommended it. And she said that it was particularly helpful for her partner to feel like he had a role and feel more engaged and, I guess, prepared.
Yeah.
And I really wanted that for my partner too, and for myself, because to me, birth was a black box. Like, you go in there for 12 to 24 to whatever 48 hours. Who knows what happens? And then at the end, you have a baby. That's what it was to me. And so when we did the course, it really filled in the blanks, and that helped me so much to, I know, like, the stages of labor are, I guess, sometimes contested in terms of how long they are, what they actually are, and that kind of thing. But to me, having some, what do you call it, like signposts about, like, here's where you're at, some landmarks, really, really helped, that I knew, like, my contractions would be, you know, potentially this far apart and feel like this, and then they would become more intense. And then I'd be in transition, and then I'd be pushing. And maybe there were, you know, some extra stages, or maybe I skipped through some of them a little, but no, having those signposts for me to know where I was at just helped me so much.
Yeah.
In preparation and in the moment.
Yeah, that's powerful. Knowledge is power. Understanding what's ahead and what to expect for both you and your partner being able to read the situation too, makes such a big difference. So when you look at where you were at, and then doing the hospital classes, doing then the calm birth classes here in Canberra with our organisation when we were Calm Birth, and then you needed to do the practices. Now, you told me earlier that the practices made a big difference. What was that like after doing the course? And then what did you notice?
Well, one thing I noticed is when I went on maternity leave, where I work, they require you to leave 6 weeks before your due date, unless your doctor says it's okay for you to continue. I was like, I'm out of here. I'm so tired. I had preeclampsia, and I didn't realize until my second pregnancy, where I didn't have preeclampsia, how much that affected me and made me actually feel unwell. But I was desperate to finish work. I was so tired. I was finding it very hard. And people would say to me, "Oh, what are you going to do? What are you going to do for 6 weeks?" And to me, that is the beginning of the devaluing of women's work. Like, if you want to know what I'll be doing, I'll be expressing colostrum. I'll be doing perineal massage. I'll be learning about labor and doing the preparation that I need to do to safely deliver a baby, and, you know, how
growing a baby,
avoid trauma in the process.
Yeah, wow.
I actually found it really insulting, but also it felt inappropriate to talk about my perineum with my colleagues or talk about my nipples. When I expressing the first time, I thought, nah, I've had these boobs a long time. I know what they can do, and they don't have anything inside them. But voila, they did.
Nesting is such an so nesting is that last part of the pregnancy, and we think nesting is about cleaning things we normally wouldn't clean. It's so much more than that. It's bringing you into a state of birth readiness. And it's where women just lose their care factor for things they might have loved. You might have loved your work, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I just don't care about this anymore. But what's actually happening is she's getting ready to be the mother, and there's a lot of transformational forces going on inside of you that are preparing you for this massive upgrade, this intense experience of giving birth, and then, of course, being ready to welcome a baby and attend to a very, a baby, newborn baby has really high needs. So that those last few weeks to help women build up their energy levels and prepare, like you really owned your preparation and said, yeah, this is work. I'm doing the job of motherhood right now. And you absolutely are. I love how you've brought that out.
And yeah, I did the meditations a lot, because it felt to me like study. Like when we're not just going off to have our tonsils removed and then 3 days later you're recovered. Your brain is going through big permanent changes. Like you're changing as a person, which I've learned through through listening to like a lot of different things. I'm so just obsessed with birth now. But yeah, you're really undergoing a momentous change, like puberty. You come out the other side and you are different to how you were. And yeah, I treated it not like an exam, but like the big change that it is. And I really felt like I studied for birth. I read the book that we had received at Calm Birth and just read those birth stories. And I really wanted to kind of give a shout out to one colleague who said to me, I found birth really good. And she was the only one. Most people said like, "Ooh, yeah, that was hard. I'm glad it's over, but you just got to go through it." But she said, "I really liked it. It was good." And I just grasped onto that. And in addition to reading the other birth stories, just totally changed my perspective. And so I found that to be really valuable preparation, reading the birth stories and listening to the meditations, particularly the sleep one, because as I mentioned, I was super anxious. I was just convinced that my pregnancy could not, last. So I was really, really struggling to sleep and was very stressed right until he was on my chest.
People love that sleep track that I did. It's powerful. So tell us about your first birth. How did it unfold?
Okay, so my preeclampsia kind of
so when you say preeclampsia, you didn't have full-blown preeclampsia, or they would have induced you a lot earlier. Did you have signs of preeclampsia? I just wanted to
my blood pressure was going up,
right,
and my platelets were coming down, but slowly.
Okay. Right.
And my doctor said, essentially, we'll monitor this because at some point it's going slowly up at a small gradient, and it may suddenly peak and get bad. And she'd asked me to look out for liver pain. Like I didn't know where my liver was, but she had said, pointed to my right side of my body and said, just let us know if you have any pain here. And one night after dinner, I was 37 and 3, I would guess. And after dinner, I thought I had indigestion because, man, I just immediately had pain. I was sitting on the couch. I couldn't sit on the couch anymore. I was standing up and I couldn't fall asleep. Like the pain just persisted. And when I did drift off, when I woke up at 3, the pain was exactly the same. Like it hadn't changed at all. So I thought it's not digestion. So I called the birth suite at the hospital, or delivery suite, and they said, come in and we'll do a trace. I'd had quite a lot of traces because I had thought there was a change in his movement. So over the preceding weeks, I had a few traces. So yeah, happy to go in. We went in the middle of the night and everything was fine, but they did a follow-up blood test. I'd had one coincidentally the day before, the day that I started to experience this pain. But so then, less than 24 hours later, I had another blood test just to check if anything had changed. And the doctor who was on call, the obstetrician on call, because mine was away, which I didn't know, he said, I'll call you if there's any problem. So we went home, I went to bed and woke up at about midday with no missed call. So I thought, okay, we're all good. But then he called and said that some level in my liver had gone from, I don't remember now, but it was like, say it had been 300 and now it was 1200 or something.
Right. So
it was a dramatic change, and he said your liver's inflamed and you're going to have your baby today, so come on in. And it was a weekend, and he asked me to come to, I was going to be birthing at Calvary John James.
Yeah.
And he'd said come to Calvary Bruce. He said because it was less busy and closer to where I live, but I also think it was probably because they have surgical staff there on the weekends, whereas the other hospital would have had to call them in just in case it went badly, I guess, or needed cesarean or whatever. So I was birthing, on a different day with a different doctor in a different hospital.
Wow.
And I was a bit disoriented, like a bit disappointed, I guess. But also I was just, as I mentioned, very stressed about this baby, and was like, okay, if that's what we're doing, let's go do it. And in my diary, I've written that I was really excited. So I say that I was really stressed, but I think I was really excited also to have the baby. Like, this is something I'd wanted for so long. So, and I felt really prepared. Like it was the day before that I'd finished, finished my nesting. I'd finished the baby's room. The bags were packed. They were sitting in the cot ready to go. Like,
you were ready.
I'd cooked my whatever I was going to eat after birth, and like everything was done. I'd made my pads and they were in the freezer. I'd done all the things that I
were ready
to do. Yeah.
So that would have been a big thing to adjust to, though. Did you have a bit of an emotional meltdown? What did you anchor yourself to kind of, maybe it was just the baby, the fact that you were going to meet your baby?
Yeah, I wrote in my diary that I was surprisingly calm. I reread it just before our chat. And I called my mum and I called my partner because they were both going to come with me. And I think like partly my mum, I know she wanted to be there, but also to me, like, hospital is with my mum because that's another cancer thing. Like, she was always the one who slept over in the room with me, and that's just like my comfort, I guess. So they were both like, oh, wow, and I was like, it's okay, we just have to go. So let's get our stuff and we'll go. And I was just really calm and kind of focused, but that's how I roll anyway. Like, if something stressful happens, I'm often a person to say, it's all right, I'll just deal with it. So I really wasn't too bothered.
Do you
but
think
I know
that
a lot of
came
people
from being 11 and having to deal with because that's a beautiful quality to have, is the ability to be calm in the chaos and the ability to roll with what is and not fight against the acceptance of what is unfolding in our lives. I mean, we can all have little hissy fits and carry on when we don't get the car park we want. I mean, you're talking about big stuff here. Well, do you think that was related to what you had to adapt to as a child? Because children are very adaptable generally.
Definitely. Like, my chemo had, like, so many side effects, so many horror stories that I won't go into, but there were just a lot of things that happen, kind of like in early parenthood, where things get so messy and you're just like, okay, the baby's weed on itself and on me. Just while I was doing nappy change, I need to change like everything and clean the carpet and all right, like, okay, let's just do it. It's kind of like that.
These are wonderful skills to have, people, the ability to roll with life and what is, especially in the chaos, especially when there's urine going everywhere and shit happening. And
I think I learned in hospital that you just have to do what you have to do, and chemo is awful because you have to make yourself sick in order to get better.
Right.
And that's a really tough thing for a child to comprehend and to accept. Like, you have to go back to hospital. You feel fine now, but you have to go in and get sick so that you don't die. It's really intense. And so to me, my adjustment was that, this pregnancy and this engagement with doctors and hospitals is positive. And I found that really
That's
hard because I
powerful.
found myself getting stressed when I was going to my obstetrician appointments. And I
Mm,
thought, no, you're like, everything's good. You're
mm.
continuing to go to these appointments because you're pregnant. That's awesome. And you're continuing to go because you're progressing through the pregnancy and everything's fine. And now I get to go to hospital to have this baby, to get, this person in my life that I really, really want, not for something bad, not because I'm ill, although I was a bit ill with the.
That's such a powerful mindset, Jen.
Mm,
That's incredible. And I think for people listening to this is part of the journey that you're on. You are upgrading your capacity to cope with more. That's what the mother is. The mother is a bigger version of the woman. And we can't control everything. And you certainly learn that when you're a parent. We can influence, and we exercise our capacity to influence, our agency, but really ultimately we've just got to get on board with what is
mm.
and do our best. So wow, well, that's so interesting. So what unfolded when you got to hospital?
Well, yeah, it was very much suspending my expectations. Like, I was trying to think, you want to plan your birth, but you can't. You don't know what's going to happen. And so it was just this really weird floating sensation where I was like, you're going to go through this process, but don't worry about the detail. It's what's going to happen is going to happen. And I was really deliberately, I felt like I was lifting myself up out of my brain, to go like, don't worry about it. Just, each thing will come as it comes. And I'd done some prenatal yoga, and we kind of had a resolve that we made up, and we did during the yoga nidra meditation, where you're basically falling asleep, but maybe you're a little conscious as well, and you're thinking about this positive resolve. And mine was, I've got the words, but I won't bother finding them. It was very much just about like, I trust that I will make the right decision at the time.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I really lent into that. It's just like, go with the flow.
Yeah. Your
Um,
body responds to the words and images you give it. And if you don't consciously choose the words and images, the things that are going to help you, you might default to an old pattern. So having an affirmation like that is so much more powerful than, oh my goodness, who's this? I don't know this person. What's going to happen next? But and like a statement like that is going to completely, if you really lean into it, like you're describing, it's going to completely transform your experience of what's happening. So that was a good anchor, what you're describing there.
yeah, and I had really wanted to experience, just because I think from my mum's stories, I really wanted to experience going into labor, as a surprise, like, oh, my water's broken, I'm in labor. But I had to go in and I had to be induced and have my waters broken and all of that. So, um, you know, overall, I didn't care because I was having my baby. Um, but the induction was a big change of pace. Like, when I'd learned about it at the hospital, I didn't really want to do it.
Mm.
I wanted to be up and moving around, as we learned in the course. I didn't want to be tethered to a drip and a monitor, like the heart rate monitor.
Yeah.
And I was on fluids too, because I'd had that weird night where I just hadn't eaten. I
Mm.
hadn't eaten for basically a whole day. Um, and yeah, so, ooh, I don't know. Where do you want me to go from here? I
So
feel like I'm on
tell
the
it a
brink of
lot
a
of
giant story.
yeah, well, I'm keen to get into your second story as well. So we will move through this, but a lot of people have aversions to inductions, and for good reasons, because they do change the trajectory of a birth, and they do tend to be very intense. How were you able to manage that?
Well, mine was very intense,
Mm.
and the syntocinon
Yep, that's it.
started, and I started feeling kind of period pain cramps, and I was standing up and leaning over the bed when the contraction came, and I was like, okay, great, things are going. That's really good. I'm glad about that. Um, but after kind of a short time, about an hour and a half, my legs were shaking and I was exhausted and I felt like I couldn't stand anymore. And I was a bit like, uh-oh. I didn't think I'd need an epidural, but if this is early labor,
Yeah.
I can't do this for 12 hours. I can't do this. And so I lay down on my side, and I'd said, because I had the preeclampsia and the HELP syndrome with my liver, they'd said your platelets need to be at a certain level if you're going to have an epidural. So I was like, let's do that blood test, check my platelets, and get that epidural. But in the meantime, basically, it turns out I was in transition.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was
very quick labour.
very quick.
Yeah.
And I was on my side, and they said, let's just, after your next contraction, let's have a look if that's okay. And I was like, yes, like I don't mind. I guess like the nurses and the doctors, they don't bother me, and I kind of appreciate the information. I know I also appreciate it would be so beautiful to just have an uninterrupted birth experience and not have people looking at you and prodding you and whatever. But I didn't personally mind. And they said, oh, okay, we can see the head. You've progressed very quickly. It's time to push. And my favorite phrase, like through both my births, was just go with your body. I felt so happy both times when I heard that.
Yeah.
Because my body wanted to go, like, and the pushing I loved. It was such a strange sensation that I'd never felt before. Because it felt like it started up at my sternum, the push, and I could feel like my whole giant uterus, contracting and pushing. And yeah, the pushing went for a while, being the first baby. But in those really bad, I would say bad contractions when I was on my side, yeah, I didn't know where I was up to, and I was struggling. I tried my visualization, and it basically, to me, didn't work. I was like, well, abandoned, like too hard. And I was struggling to breathe properly, and I felt like I was in pain. And one of the midwives was holding my hand. She said, just remember, every contraction brings you closer to your baby. And I seriously was like, oh yeah, that's why we're here. I'd forgotten. Like, I was so experiencing pain so much that I'd forgotten my purpose. And once I was reminded of that, I really felt like I kind of got back on track. Like, the contractions were very, very intense, and I would call it painful, but still productive.
Yeah.
But anyway, once I got to the pushing, yeah, I kind of loved it. And I had this moment of clarity. I think his head was out or nearly out. And I just was like, all of a sudden, like, all good. And I said, Mum, how are you going? Are you all right? She's like, yeah, I'm fine. I was like, James, how about you? He's like, yeah, we're fine. And they're like, hey, don't worry about us. Just like focus on yourself. I was like, okay, it's totally good.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he came out and he was put on me, and he was purple and slimy, and I just was totally confident all of a sudden that everything was okay when he was on me.
Yeah.
And there was like blood everywhere. I think my cannula had come out and there was blood dripping on my arm, and there was some on my big toe somehow. Like, I don't know, but I just like didn't mind at all because I had this little baby on my chest, and like I'm so excited just thinking about it right now.
Wow.
Yeah, it was real, like, just amazing. And I loved it. In amongst all the blood and the pain and the kind of drama, I felt at the time too, like, oh my gosh, I love that. This was the most amazing experience of my life.
It would be very easy to look at that scene and think it was like a complete shit show, that like a scene out of a horror movie. However, we can never assume what the mother is experiencing. And you were in amongst the intensity and the hard work that you did in a short period of time. A lot of women say, oh, I hope my labour's short. Short labours can be very intense and very hard for you to catch your breath. But somehow you were able to stay really centred in that space. Why do you think that is, Jen? Like, what do you think it was that helped you to deal with such an intense experience like that?
Honestly, also my chemo, I think, because as painful as it was, it is not the worst pain that I've experienced.
Yeah.
My worst pain was actually when I woke up from a leg surgery. I'd broken my leg and I woke up, and wow, that was 10 out of 10 pain.
Yeah.
And was super intense, but it wasn't the same pain of something's wrong. And I think some people do experience that pain in birth,
Yeah.
but I didn't. I still felt like a lot is happening and I don't fully understand. But once I understood that I was in transition and my baby was like was on the move,
Yeah.
um,
You just got
I
on.
was okay. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
So I don't know. It was like
Mindset.
definitely wanting to have that baby out.
Yeah. Your mindset was just completely working for you, not against you, to enable you to get through that, because another woman could have found that so overwhelming that she could have felt it as quite traumatic. So on some level, you were able to anchor yourself to just your capacity to get through things, which you
Mm.
had a rich history of. Your It's all about the baby. That was a big trigger for you, of reminding you of, it's my baby that we're doing this for. And I imagine the support, people holding space for you, having your mother and your partner there being, holding that space for you to go through that, and even
Yeah.
worrying about them towards the end, which is funny,
Yeah.
is it's all mindset. You put the pieces of your mind and your capacity to get through this in place so you could get through that. That's really is such great wisdom coming from Jen today. I hope you're really appreciating this. So you had your first, and then how much later, when did you start to have another baby? What was the distance between them?
I kind of planned it and I was excited about it. Like while I was still on my mat leave, I was like, okay, when will I have the next
You
baby?
went on pretty early, did you? You were
Well,
ready.
I was planning, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
But the gap between them is 2.5 years.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
so what was that pregnancy like?
so much better. I wasn't anxious in that same, like, on reflection, probably diagnosable way if I'd recognized it. But I wasn't anxious like that. I kind of knew that I could do it and that it was real and like I was going to have a baby, which I just found it really hard to shift that mindset through my first pregnancy. Um, yeah, we fell pregnant fairly easily again. And I was so excited. Yeah, I was just really excited this time and let myself enjoy it. The first time I didn't look at baby clothes for months and months because I just thought this can't be real. Like it's too
Yeah.
good to be true. I can't get excited and then have it go wrong. But this time I would like buy little baby clothes and I would think about how beautiful my son's gonna be as a brother and
How lovely.
yeah, when I was at work before, I'd told people I felt like I was carrying around my happy little secret, me and my little friend. Yeah, it was just really lovely. But I think because I had a toddler and I was at work and you don't get to nap so much in the second pregnancy,
Yeah.
I didn't give a lot of thought to birth, but I knew that I would use that time when I went on mat leave to prepare again.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I kind of relaxed through that pregnancy. I didn't have preeclampsia this time. Like, I had the same doctor, and she said, this is a totally different pregnancy for you. And I
Wow.
felt so much healthier. Like, I was still exercising, and I really felt so much better and realized in retrospect that I had been sick that first time.
Yeah.
Um, which was funny because I think of it so positively, the whole thing. And I think, I had a great experience. Really, nothing went wrong. Kind of something did go wrong, but it was really manageable.
Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, when I went on maternity leave, I pulled out all my old materials, like my calm birth book of the birth stories and my like sheet that had the stages of labor and how long apart you can expect the contractions. And I was a bit nervous about going into labor as a surprise, which I still kind of wanted to do. But given how fast my first birth was, they were basically like, you feel anything, you come in because you're gonna have that baby in like half an hour to 2 hours. And I live half an hour from the hospital. So I was a bit nervous. Um, but I really this time did even more with the meditations. Like
Mm.
I listened to a bunch of different ones, and um, to the extent that while I was in the labor, I was word for word reciting these things in my
Wow.
mind. Yeah, it was really good. So I ended up being induced again, which I am still not 100% sure that I needed to be. Um, but ultimately, whatever, I don't mind. I've got my healthy baby and I'm well. Um, the good thing was, though, that I only had my waters broken and I didn't have to go on the drip,
Okay.
because last time its effect had been so dramatic. They were
Mm.
like, let's just break your waters and probably you'll take it from there. Um, and so, yeah, that's what happened. However, I guess everybody expected me to have a fast birth, including me. And I didn't. Like, I didn't really progress. Like, I was having contractions, but it was definitely that first stage for a long time, a lot of hours. And my mum would check in by text, and the doctors and the midwives would check in, and we're all like, nothing really happening here, you know. Um, and I felt like everyone was waiting for me. And I do wish that I'd had more kind of confidence and presence to say, hey, this is my birth suite now.
Mm.
I'm going to take how long I take, and you're going to massage my back, and you're going to get me some water. You know, like I wish I had owned it a bit more, but I had expected it to just take off and go like last time.
Yeah, they can be so different.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, and I wasn't a real, like, we had the oh, I can't remember what it's called, Tracy, but your one, like, that kind of talks you through the birth, where you're preparing
Yep,
and
the birth rehearsal.
imagining. Yeah, the rehearsal. We had that one on while I was in there. Um, and played it like over and over because we were in there for, many hours waiting for things to really get started. But at the same time, like, my partner was just kind of on his phone, and we had put on the TV because we're like, oh, might as well just watch some home renos on Nine Life. And yeah, I can't say that I was really in that, like, spiritual space where I would kind of like to have been, to really, like, get in the mindset and get
Mm.
things going. And so eventually, I said to my partner, you go off and have, like, get something for dinner, and I'll get in the shower. And basically, as soon as I got in the shower, oh, it felt amazing. And it was like just a surge, a total shift for my body and my mind. I think because I was alone and I didn't feel the pressure of people waiting for me to give birth. Um, and the water just was warm and amazing. Um, and I had one strong contraction, and then right after I had another, and I said to myself, oh no, another one already. And I was like, wait, oh yes, this is what you wanted. Like, you wanted it to progress, so here we are, let's go.
That's so fascinating. Women on their own, without pressure, without being observed, without the bright lights or the TV. That's the space that promotes the conditions for the right hormonal cocktail to start to, come into play. I remember being at a birth with a woman as a doula, and she never, every time we got close to her, her contractions would stop. So myself and the midwife, we just had a chat about this and thought, I know what we need to do. And we put her in the bathroom, turned off the lights and closed the door. And she was on her own. And we could hear the contractions start to come get fast. So she was super sensitive to people being around her. So it's an interesting thing to reflect upon. Any animal, that we're no different to other animals. Same thing. When they're being observed, they rarely go into labour during the day. They tend to do it more at night, when it's dark, when it's intimate, creating those conditions. So you're in the shower starting to have strong contractions. You caught your mind and said, okay, yes, I'm saying yes to this. I'm stepping into it. How did it unfold from there?
Well, may I read your passage from my diary?
Sure, I'd love you to.
Straight after I basically straight after I got to the ward, I had an opportunity that night to write, and I was like, I'm just going to make some notes before I try to go to sleep.
Wow.
But I wrote the calm birth meditation guided my entire inner voice / mental state. I'd played them so many times that I had so many lines to call on. In the shower, I was reciting, let the waves wash over you, under you, through you. Your body knows how to do this. It was made to do this. I trust my body and I trust my baby, over and over again. And it
Wow.
was, yeah, every contraction. I actually tried, like when you said through you, over and under and through,
Yeah.
in my mind, I tried one direction. I can't remember, like maybe say it was forward to back was
Yeah.
the way it went through. And that
Yeah.
was okay. And now I was like, oh, maybe I'll try the other way, back to forward. And I was like, no, no,
Oh,
that's no good. Just something about it.
wow.
I found it really helpful to just be like, yeah, to just kind of let it happen and know that it was really productive, each
Yeah.
one of these,
Yeah.
and that this wasn't my life now. Like I wasn't going to be like this forever, because man, it's still hard, but it
Yeah.
didn't hurt in the way that my first birth strong contractions had.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was
So,
super intense, but it really helped.
so Jen's describing the tracks that you're talking about. They're not actually calm birth tracks. These are the
Yeah,
Transform Your Birth
they're
tracks.
yours. Yeah.
And these are the ones we've done more recently. And the Labour Dance is a track that we use with just really good messaging that just is peppered through with background music. And it sounds like your mind completely took that as this is the operating principle through which we now do birth. So I often laugh with families that I work with that we're brainwashing you. And that sounds a bit negative, but actually in a good way. We're washing out the old beliefs and we're giving you thoughts which create feelings, which create images, and images and feelings create physiology. And so that's why the body can respond differently. So when we work with the mind and start to take on new ways of thinking and feeling about the whole birth experience, focusing on the baby, less, rather than the sensations, but working with the fundamental belief that you can do this, it literally changes the way you experience the whole process. I love that you've brought a lot of this out, Jen, because this is the stuff that's missing in the broader realm of what we see as childbirth education. It's the missing the mind component, and yet the mind and the body are so intricately connected. They are one and the same thing. So that's really powerful.
Yeah, I wish that some of these, I guess, like non-medical ways of dealing with pain, which are actually deployed in some medical circles, like childhood cancer, they use
Yeah.
meditation and things like that, because
Yeah,
you
right.
reach the limit of the drugs that you can give. Like you can only give so much before it's harmful. So they do some of these things, but I wish it was standard, like that
Yeah.
everybody could afford to go to a course where they learn these techniques, and that their only option isn't epidural, or I had the gas both times, so like nothing against it, but that you have more things to draw on.
Yeah, than what you realise. Because you're right, we're led to go down that pharmacological path thinking that we need it, and why would we put ourselves through it? But what you're describing there not only is the tools and the techniques that you've drawn on, not only is that helping you to manage the pain, it's actually bringing your whole body and your whole being into the prime physiological space of not just getting through the birth, but to be ready to parent and to be ready to meet that baby and to create the milk and to be really ready to respond to the needs of the baby. There's very powerful, just beautiful things that unlock in the blueprint of creation when we're able to activate the full expression of that hormonal cocktail and that blueprint of birth, of what it's meant to be. And I think women know intrinsically, whether they're able to consciously be aware of it, but there's a feeling in most women that they actually do want to give birth and they want to get through it and they want to see what they're capable of and they want to feel transformed or empowered or whatever their language is and they kind of sense this. I've seen it. I've seen when I prepare women in their pregnancy talk about this. I feel like I should be able to do it. That's often how they'll say it. And of course, sometimes we're able to, all the ducks align or all the stars are in the right place and things go without any need for help. And sometimes we need help and we do have to travel different paths like you did for your first birth.
Mm.
But either way, we kind of know that there's something being unlocked, activated, awakened. These are the sort of words. Rhea Dempsey, I've just been listening to her talking on a couple of podcasts, and she's just done a beautiful book of recent times called Beyond the Birth Plan. And she talks a lot about this as a woman who's sat in births, particularly home births. It's where you really see it and you feel it, that there are these storms traveling through the woman's body. And, and she's literally being transformed through this process. And when we can understand that in birth and appreciate that, we've got to respect this. We've got to actually bow down to the feet of birth and respect what's being welcomed in this space, when we can create those perfect conditions to really help the mother travel the path that she has to travel, then miracles, all sorts of miraculous changes happen inside of her. Yeah. So I'm really, I thank you for sharing that. So you really awakened to something quite profound inside of you. Tell me how that translated when you met your baby and then into parenting. I'm keen to know about that too.
Okay. I just during pushing, I thought to myself, this is the last time you have to do this. Not planning any more kids. Like, this is it, Jen. I don't know how you thought that you liked birth. But like, you just have to get through this and then you don't have to do this again. And literally, I wrote in my diary that night, like, just so I remember, I didn't want to do this again. The next day, I said to James, do you think we should have another baby?
Oh, I bet he wanted to run for the hills at that point.
Well, we had to talk about it, and we came full circle, and we're like, oh, okay, actually, two's right for us. But
that's the oxytocin, darling.
Yeah, there is no sense of achievement like delivering a baby. Man, I just felt like a goddess. And I thought, how can we have a society that doesn't respect women or motherhood when this is incredible what people are doing every day?
Yep.
I just loved it. Like, that feeling is like, yes, I am amazing. So like, there's definitely a huge high, well, there was for me after that. And I think, this baby, he just latched so well and he fed right away. And again, I saw the contrast between my baby delivered, at 37 weeks to this little guy at 39. And just noticed like how much more alert and how much more developed he was.
And ready to land, probably.
And so I just found everything so easy, and I was amazed. Like, the next day I almost felt normal. Of course I was still bleeding and everything, but I bumped into a mum that I'd spoken to while I'd had my waters broken. I was like walking about, get things moving. And I chatted to her. She just had a baby. And she saw me in the hallway. She was like, oh, what? You're like fine. What is this? I'm so jealous. I was like, oh, it's not like no special skill. It's just my second one. But yeah, I really feel for the first time mums, because man, I was a mess that first time, like so hormonal and crying about everything in a happy way, but just crying about everything. And this time I was really like, yep, this is great.
That's the difference between the synthetic hormone of oxytocin and the real hormone. Because the synthetic hormone, whilst it gives us those contractions, it doesn't create as many receptors in the body, and it takes over our own oxytocin a little bit more, and And so our own oxytocin, which gets naturally activated in birth, is preparing you not just to contract your uterus, but it's a multitasker. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and it lights up all of these reward centers in the brain, getting us ready for this peak moment of meeting our babies, and then just helping us to feel high and on, ready, because it is intense those next few days, weeks, months.
That was the other most valuable thing about the course. I mentioned the stages of labor helped me, but also understanding the hormones. Because we basically, since puberty, as people joke about hormones, like, oh, she's hormonal, or oh, I'm out of control, my hormones are in control. But actually, these hormones grow human beings and they're very powerful and important and valuable. And really being conscious about, like, don't be overcome by adrenaline, relax and get that oxytocin.
Flowing.
So helpful to be able to consciously think about and understand. And I'm just in awe of hormones now, and I don't think they're funny or embarrassing at all. Like, I think they're amazing and powerful, and we should all be kind of making use of them throughout our lives. Like, even when I was feeding, when I went home, I loved that I would feel the afterbirth contractions, when the uterus is shrinking back down, and I would feel them every time that I started to feed him. And I'd be like, oh, thank you, uterus. Like, you've done such a good job and you're still doing it, like, still working away. And I get to feel good and happy and relaxed and sleepy while it works away.
I love what you're saying about hormones. I've just I'm on the other side of menopause now, so I've had another shift in my hormonal cocktail, and menopause gets such a bad rap, and I started to notice, really, which I can now reflect on and understand more, and I'm surprised that we don't have this in our narrative. I might have to do Transform Your Menopause course, something like that. But the first thing I noticed is I got really edgy and angry and impatient and intolerant. And then I started to think, oh, I don't give a fuck anymore. These are the don't give a fuck hormones, Then I started to have hot flushes, and I started to think, these are power surges. And I started to reframe what hot flushes were. And then they got really, really bad. And then I started to realize that they were connected to my stress levels. So that caused me to make better decisions about not stressing about stuff and working out what's important to me and what isn't. And so it was a bit of a cleaning out. And, so I think we can look at hormonal women and say, oh, you poor thing. Whereas I'm with you on that. I just think, no, look a bit deeper into what's actually going on for that woman and what sort of transformative forces that we talked about earlier are being invoked as well, that there's an intelligence to the system. It strikes me all the time as I watch more and more and learn more and more. I just worship at the feet of Mother Nature, and however you want to frame that, I just think it's an incredible thing that we've forgotten to respect and to, hold as sacred and to protect, which is what we need to do. So what a conversation, Jen. We've covered some pretty big stuff. I always like to ask people, what have you learned about yourself, and what would you tell a pregnant woman? Have you got an answer for that?
Oh, I guess, gosh. No, about myself, I'm really I feel like a little more in touch with some form of spirituality, which I've never felt before. And I'm really interested in where it might take me, or what I will, explore or learn next. And for pregnant women, gosh, there's so much. Like, I just want to talk about pregnancy and birth all the time. And everyone's going to have, a different experience and be open to different ideas. But I would always recommend some kind of like, hypnobirthing,
birth,
birthing,
transform
transform
your
your
birth.
birth,
Mm.
something to open your mind to the possibility that birth is going to be an amazing experience, not an experience to fear or dread or just get through, because it
Yeah.
can be so much more than that.
Well said. I'm a great believer in any program that works with the mind, because that's where we hold the baggage. It's where we hold the stuff that we can walk into a labour room with that can get in the way of us really being able to work with the process of birth, not against it. So I want to thank you today for taking us to areas in this podcast that I want to explore more, particularly after listening to Rhea Dempsey talk. It's something that we're just not acknowledging medically, that there's a much bigger thing going on than just a uterus spitting out a piece of meat.
Yeah.
Pretty harsh way of saying it, but sometimes I think that's what we think we're doing in hospitals, and when we medicalize birth, that we're just focusing on the physiology of it and not what's attached to the uterus, which is a woman, a fully formed soul and spirit, and she's giving birth to a human soul as well. And there are things going on there that we don't really talk about. And I feel like this conversation took us to that place today. So I really appreciate you sharing your great wisdom that's come from birthing your two gorgeous children. And yeah, thanks, Jen, for being here. It's really good having you.
Yeah, thanks so much for giving me an opportunity to chat to you, who I've heard so much in my, in my phone speaker.
Your head.
And to talk about birth. I hope I've said the things that I've meant to say, because I feel like there's a million things I want to talk about.
We'll have to write some
People
stuff.
who are interested.
Yeah. It's a really sacred area of life, and I want to do my best to keep these ideas floating through people and helping them to understand that there are things you can do to learn, to create inside of you, and to prepare when it comes to welcoming your beautiful babies. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Bye. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Our Transform Your Birth course, both in Canberra and online, is waiting for you to feel calmer and more confident to give birth and change the way you labour. Or why not watch our free masterclass on Keeping Relaxed and Excited About Birth, where we discuss the 3 most important things that can change a birth. You'll find us at our website on www.transformparenting.com.au.